Recording in progress.
WBZD. Hey guys, welcome back to WBZD. I'm Ashlyn.
I'm Ronnie.
I'm Joyce.
And I'm Nally.
And we are GT14, architecture students from the University of Hawaii studying abroad at Tongji University in Shanghai. Today we have a very special podcast for you. We're going to be discussing our process of doing the master's in Tongji University. We have two very special guests again here in the podcast, Roland and David. And they're also going to explain their process of going through the master's thesis because it is slightly different than what us University of Hawaii students are going through. And also Ronnie has a different process as well because he is not doing a design master's thesis, but doing a more research-based thesis. Roland and David, would you guys like to introduce yourselves to the podcast again?
Sure. So my name is David. I do study urban planning at the Technical University of Vienna, and I'm very happy to be here again. Thank you for having us.
I'm Roland. I'm studying architecture at the Technical University of Vienna, and I'm also very happy to be here again and pretty excited for the podcast.
Well, thank you guys so much for being on the podcast today. You guys are our number one reoccurring podcast guests alongside Ben, so we guys are so happy to have you guys on the podcast again. I guess so we can start talking about our master's thesis and how it all started. Would someone want to explain the first process of how we got through the master's and going through the proposal?
Maybe for people that are just jumping in the podcast, the four of us from University of Hawaii and then also Shen, who's not here with us. Our program is 3 years long. First year in Hawaii, second year that we're currently doing in Shanghai, where we get a master's degree here in Shanghai before going back and finishing our doctorate degree the third year, which I think is quite a bit different from Roland and David's experience at their university. So maybe they can tell us more about that. Coming here to do our master's is like kind of built into our doctorate program. So we get to like double count things and things, which is really nice.
So yeah, that's for the University of Hawaii and the process for our master's thesis for Tongji. So what is it like for Austria?
Okay, so ours is also a 3 years program, which are 2 years in Austria and 1 year here in China. And then it depends on how you can fit it in, but normally it would be the same structure as you, being 1 + 1 + 1. In reality, most of us do 2 years in Austria, which would be our regular master in Austria, are almost finished or already finished with it there. And then we do 1 year here in Tongji. We write our master thesis. And thanks to it being a double degree program, we get acknowledged for 1 year of the time in Austria here in Tongji as well. So at the end of all the track, we get 2 degrees, one in Vienna and one here in Shanghai.
One thing that is a little bit special maybe is that we're only doing one master thesis, but we have like 2 supervisors for that. We have one from the Tongji University and one from the Viennese University. And so we have to figure out how to do a project that fits into both contexts and also is interesting for as well Austria as China.
And I think it's especially interesting or especially challenging for you as an architect because for you, like you have slightly different specifications on your master thesis and you have to do a design part, a more theoretical part.
Yes, here at the Tongji University, our focus is really a lot about the theoretical part. In Vienna, the master thesis normally consists of, let's say, 80% design and a little bit of description how we got to the design. And here it's rather we really have to work on a strong research gap and focus on that. And then we will do a design, which we already know how to do because we studied for 5 years. That's at least what my supervisor said to me. So it's pretty interesting to get together both parts.
I was going to say, I'm kind of jealous that you guys only have to do one thesis, but it sounds like it might be like twice as complicated because you're basically trying to put 2 theses together into one thesis. So that sounds really complicated.
It really is.
Are you guys also having a Chinese supervisor?
Here, yeah. So we have our master's thesis supervisor here, and then we'll have a doctorate thesis supervisor in Hawaii that we just got assigned to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually, I'm not sure if your guys' the process is the same, but we started our master's for Tongji back in Hawaii. So we actually wrote our proposal to get assigned a Tongji advisor back in Hawaii. So we had to pick a topic, which I feel like we picked it really early, especially since we didn't know much about China and much about what we wanted to research. We kind of got told we needed to just come up with a proposal so we can get assigned an advisor like right away. So we were all scrambling, trying to find a topic to research. And just wrote a proposal, sent it in, and I guess whatever we wrote got thrown into like a pile of other proposals as well. And our advisors just picked what was interesting to them and picked us, and we got assigned to them, and we reached out to them, and we're talking over WeChat and seeing if we had to change our topics or not. And I think eventually most of us, our topics changed slightly. We are still like talking about the topics we really wanted to talk about in the beginning, but definitely things changed over time.
So we kind of turned in our proposals in the beginning or in the spring semester before we came to China. So we had the spring and then the summer before we came to China. And during that process, we were talking to advisors, we were getting assigned to advisors. And throughout that process of talking, a lot has changed. And then once you actually get to China, your topic kind of takes a 180 sometimes. Just because you kind of get the more China experience, but also your advisor knows China a little better and they have an idea of what might be a better topic for you. We didn't know that was going to be happening. So a lot of our topics changed slightly from what we initially imagined to be doing.
Was it similar in your guys' experience coming from Austria?
Yeah, so for us it works similarly. We also got assigned a professor based on our topic that we submitted beforehand. And most of us got someone related to their topic too. I think for us it was also a mix because we didn't only have to submit like our interest for the master thesis, but also a bit of our background. So I have the feeling that I got assigned to my professor more based on my background and the topics I have already been writing about, which are very differently on the ones or on the topic I want to write my master thesis about. So I think my professor has a lot of expertise in mobility, which would be like one of the fields I have been working the most, but maybe less experience in the topic I will be writing about. So of course he also tried to change my topic, but because I've been wanting to write about it for a long time, actually, I had to stay a bit stubborn to convince him to stay on my topic, because I really think it makes sense to touch upon it and start some research foundations on this very topic.
I think that's a really good point, because like you can see that it works in both ways. Like sometimes you do need to defend and be like, no, I really want to work on this. Whereas there's also like the feedback you can get from your advisor that can be like, oh, this will work really well because of this. So there's like, I feel like that give and take is a good.
I feel like for my thesis, I wanted to do more resort-based things and like research about tourism in an architecture urban scale. But then I came here and I'm kind of still doing that, but I'm doing a more rural village in tourism. And I was thinking initially when I was writing it, I was going to do more of a big scale tourism place, but I actually am doing more of a small scale, revitalize a rural village. So it's a much smaller scale than I was expecting, but it is, I think, more interesting and something I wouldn't have researched back at home, because it is something so unique. I think it's an old village, an old fishing village that is trying to be revitalized and like keep the culture alive, and while maintaining all this tourism that is kind of booming in this city. So I think it was pretty interesting to have my topic change, but also still be interested in what I'm researching. And the process was definitely difficult, I feel, in the beginning, not understanding what was really expected in the end, and trying to figure that out along the way was definitely a little bit difficult.
I kind of agree. I think you mentioned, yeah, Ashlyn mentioned that I'm doing a slightly different degree. Well, I think it is a separate degree. But anyway, so my thesis is a bit different. So instead of doing like the practical design thesis like Natalie, Joyce, and Ashlyn are doing, my thesis is more research-based. And so my final product, quote unquote, is my thesis paper. But then I also have to write a journal paper and get it published in an international journal before I can graduate. That's based on my research, my findings, my project. And so it's a little bit different. So I don't do like a design process at the end. It's just the paper. And so I think that was a bit confusing and different as well, because no international students have done that before. And so they're like, we don't know what the deadlines are, and we don't know how this process is going to work. And my advisor did tell me the first time I met with her that she's like, this is going to be really, really difficult, because the students that do this process, the research-based one, have like 2 or 3 years to do their research, whereas you have like 4 months to do yours. So I don't know how you guys feel like it being like super crunched together. Like it's not normal spacing, so you're doing like this dual degree thing, and so it's always just like smashed in and like really fast.
I agree. I think when I first met with my advisor, she also knew that we only had 1 year and she was worried about it because we won't have that much time to actually work on it, unlike the other master students that were in Tongji. And I thought, oh, 1 year is a lot of time. I think you guys also, we were also talking about this. We thought 1 year was enough time to do a thesis. Like, we can get all our research done, all our design done. But when it actually came to the time, you realize that you have so much other stuff to worry about, so much other stuff to do, but also you're trying to explore Shanghai and like this, just China in general. So just trying to balance and manage that time is something you learn throughout the process.
Because I think, like you're saying, you do forget that you also have like 15 graduate level credits that you're also taking each semester, and Chinese class and culture classes here, and so it's just a lot.
Yeah.
On top of the 16 lectures, which is also required to graduate.
I think one thing that's interesting is that we talked about how our topics changed a lot, but I think it is interesting and it was kind of helpful to be able to understand what the actual problems were in Shanghai. Because before we came here, we did a thesis proposal. We had to choose a topic, but we didn't know China, we didn't know Shanghai. But speaking with your advisor, who knew Shanghai a lot better, they knew what the problems that Shanghai was facing, and they were able to suggest a new topic that was applicable to Shanghai. But also another note is that since the Hawaii students are doing 2 degrees or 2 theses, one master's and 1 doctorate, our professor wanted us to separate that, so one's more focused in China and one's more focused in Hawaii or the US. Is that the same, or how is it like for the Austria students?
Actually, for me, this was a pretty hard nut to crack, as in the beginning, I wanted to do something very international. I wanted to work with problem that I would like to find in the city of Shanghai, for example, and I saw, okay, it's at the sea level, so maybe it's not that flood prone. Maybe I will work with some, actually I'm very interested in rivers and riverscapes and all that areas on the riverside. But then I figured out, okay, they've already done a lot here. And so somehow my topic changed back to Vienna, and I wanted to work with a creek I found there, which does not look that nicely done like in Shanghai. Today, actually, we were at the North Bund, which is a relatively new part of Shanghai town, where they did a great job in renewing the river landscape. And so I had the idea, okay, maybe bring my knowledge I gain here back to Vienna. And that's actually something that made me think of the whole program in a different way, that you don't only get into with your ideas and want to try something out, but maybe gain the knowledge here and then also bring it back and share it in each direction.
I think that's one thing, like, I remember when we first learned that, like, our thesis topic would be more geared towards the interests of our mentor. I was thinking of that as like a very negative thing, like, but it's not what I want to focus on my master's thesis. But similar to, I think, what you're saying and what Joyce was talking about, like having them like change and be like, actually, this would be a better topic or something like that, or kind of like challenging you to think of something else. It does make you like learn and change your perspective and like do something different that like I would not have thought about beforehand, which I think is just a really cool part of this program.
I think also too, at least for my thesis, it might be different for everyone else, but I didn't really choose my site. My advisor actually proposed a site to me, and I think that was really helpful to begin with because I didn't know Shanghai very well to be able to have someone propose a site where I can just kind of dive straight into that and just research everything about that site and figure everything out from like going off of that. And so like I don't think I would have known about this site without my advisor telling me, and I wouldn't have visited like a fishing village in Shanghai without knowing that it was there and having it as my thesis topic. So being able to kind of see that different side of Shanghai, like the older side of Shanghai, was pretty interesting.
And I think just like having them help us this way like helps to streamline this process. Like we are trying to do it in like 4 or 5 months. And so I think just having, because my situation was similar, like I wanted to work with rural ethnic communities in China, which, you know, it's a huge country. So like, how do you narrow that down? And unfortunately, my advisor had worked with a small ethnic rural village. And so she was able to help me like go on a visit there with some other classes and set up meetings with the government and things like that. So it worked out really well. Even though it wasn't what I wanted to focus on, like we've been saying, it worked out for the better.
I think it was also interesting is that we had to do the initial proposal and then we had to kind of re-propose it again once we came to Tongji. So I think around, it was October, at least for the University of Hawaii students, we had to re-propose our thesis to a Tongji faculty panel and explain our, I guess, revised thesis proposal, more geared towards finding our site finally and doing some research and then trying to propose our ideas of what we wanted to design in the end.
Since we're kind of on the topic of schedule, I know that the Hawaii students were on a different schedule compared to other international master's students or exchange dual degree programs. So we can kind of go over it. I think Hawaii students were on an earlier schedule, if that makes sense. Like a lot of our stuff were pushed earlier. So we did our master's thesis proposal in Tongji in October. And then we had a midterm in April. And then we recently had our blind review, which was in May. So that was our schedule. But I know it's different for you guys. What is your schedule like?
I think us Vienna students have the most relaxed schedule in those terms. We had to present our master thesis proposal in December. And then now we are presenting, we are recording this at the end of May, and we haven't had our master thesis midterm yet, which is going to be in June. But also this leads me to another topic, which I wanted to cover when you were talking about things changing and your publications, which you're required to do. Like something we have realized here is that China is very dynamic. So it's, if you want to enter and have like a plan on how everything's going to work, like at least that's not how it works in our experience, because our deadlines always change. They were always very blurry. So I'm now saying we are going to be presenting our midterm in June, but because I just received the email today and they said like you're presenting in 10 days. Before that they said like it's going to be sometime in June, we don't know when, and you can, like, it doesn't leave you room to plan, and you're just
Still don't have a date yet.
Yeah. You're living in an uncertainty like Roland, because he doesn't know when his midterm for the architecture students is going to happen. We got like a date which was going to be the 17th, and now it's like a week earlier. Things change all the time. Same thing for publishing. We enter the program just with the information from Vienna, and then like suddenly after the presentation in December, they informed us, oh, by the way, you will be publishing, otherwise you won't be getting your title. You won't be getting your degree. And we were very surprised, like, wait, nobody told us we have to publish, and it's supposed to be like, has to do something with your thesis, but then like in our way of like, at least how we experience academia in Europe, like you would do first master thesis and then like publish a paper based on that. And here, because of the time schedule, it would be like the other way around. But then after a few months, it turns out we don't have to do that anymore. So it changed again because it wouldn't fit with all the deadlines, and now somehow they figured it out how it works without it. So for all future Hawaii students or students from somewhere else coming to China, just be aware that's the way. It is very dynamic and things can change all the time. Don't panic, things work out somehow. But be prepared to change your plans or enough times. Yeah.
That is very great advice.
I think it's also important to not be afraid to ask questions and ask for what is required, because I think also we came into this semi-knowing what was required, but not specifically understanding. And then we kind of along the way slowly had to ask our advisor, like, oh, do you know what like the final product is like being asked? And then we found out, initially we thought it was going to be 10 A1 boards, which is kind of a lot of graphics. And then we came into like around midterm time, they had a exhibition full of final theses. And my advisor told me to go look at them. And there are these big panels of all these design boards. And I was thinking in my head, I need to make 10 of those. And I was freaking out because there were massive panels. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so many graphics. And if I need to make 10 of those, I don't think I'm going to make it. And then I talked to my advisor and she was like, oh no, you only need one of those. And so in my head, I was like, wait, is she lying to me? Like, I was told I needed 10 of these. So I was so confused. But yeah, we sorted it out. And she was like, yeah, you only need one of those, which calmed me down. And I was able to kind of put things together.
For reference, those boards were at least 7 feet tall. I don't know what that is in millimeters or meters, but 7 feet tall is like about the height of a door.
I think also with being flexible with the deadlines and things like that, at least in my experience, like the faculty here also seem to recognize, at least in my experience in the US, it's like, this is the deadline. If it's not here by midnight, you fail. Whereas here, like they're either flexible with that or like with what you're turning in, they recognize that there is some confusion or flexibility in the deadline. And so they're also somewhat flexible with what's being turned in and willing to work with you after the fact to keep refining it. At least that's been my experience with like you guys turning in your proposals. Is that true?
I think that segues us maybe to the topic we already mentioned, which are those 16 lectures. And I'm going to start with the deadline thingy because that's how I thought about it again. So we were supposed to, like at the beginning of the program, they told us you need to have like attended 16 lectures and write a summary of them with your thoughts and everything until the end of the program. Then the vacation comes, the winter vacation comes, we return and they tell us on the first week, by the way, next week you need to hand in your 16 lectures. Like your summary of the 16 lectures, which, well, we didn't have time to visit as many because we were planning on visiting them in 2 semesters, right? And it was the beginning of the semester. We hadn't done it yet. So we went to our supervisors. We told them, sorry, we thought this was going to be until the end because that's what we agreed on. And then they accepted it and said like, oh, well, it's true. Then just do it until May. And then again, we didn't get a certain date, but then 1 week before having to hand it in, they told us, oh, by the way, next week, this date. And it seemed like a hard deadline because they said, like, you need to hand it in, otherwise it's going to be a problem. So we handed it in then. We almost had visited all the lectures by then.
We also did some online lectures.
Yeah, like they were flexible. We were allowed to visit online lectures too. So we put all of those together and handed it in. You guys also have to do those 16 lectures?
Yeah, we also had to do the 16 lectures, and we also thought the same, that it was going to be due at the end of the year versus in the middle after the first semester. But luckily enough, I think we talked to someone towards the end of the first semester, and they were telling us, oh, it's actually due at the end of the first semester. So we were scrambling trying to find some lectures to go to fulfill our 16 lectures. And then I think after we were like staying up super late trying to go to lectures, they told us, oh, actually, it's not due until much later. So then some of us stopped going and then just waited until the following semester to go to other lectures.
And then for me, when I had asked for clarification on that, they had said that it was all due at the same time as your thesis. And for me, long story short, I've postponed my thesis until after I finished my Hawaii degree, just with funding and different things that have happened in the research. And so I was like, oh, so my 16 lectures will be due when I turn in my thesis next year. And they're like, oh, no, we actually need it next week. And so I was kind of like, I haven't like written half of these and different stuff, but they've been quite flexible with me and said I have like an extra month to turn it in. But since I'm not doing my midterm right now.
Yes, China really likes, or at least Tongji really likes giving a 1 week before notice of when things are due. So you kind of really don't know when it's due until like 1 week before.
Which is not good for those of us that like to procrastinate until the deadline.
But very good for us, the ones of us that work well under pressure.
That's true, yeah. Which I guess one thing we haven't talked about at all in this podcast, I think, is that the campus here, the College of Architecture and Urban Planning, is not open 24 hours. And so even if you are doing an all-nighter, you get kicked off campus at 10 p.m. and then you have to go home and try and like focus again and then come back to campus when they open at like 6 a.m. It's a little bit, I guess, kind of frustrating when you're used to like a 24-hour and you can just like stay on campus and work in the studio and things like that. So it is a bit different here.
But also it changes during the semester, so maybe it changes next semester too, because at the beginning of the semester, I've been working until 2 a.m. Nobody bets an eye, so yeah.
Interesting.
And thankfully, the family marts and 7-Elevens are open 24/7 mostly. So you can always get a coffee or some other stuff to focus on your studies.
Some of them have tables.
Oh, that's true. Actually, you can even get some stuff there, eat it right there, and but don't work there because you will splash your laptop with lots of noodles and stuff.
You can also meet on 24/7 as well.
Food delivery is the best.
I think what was also reassuring was that when I was turning stuff into my advisor was also up at the same time as me. So knowing that she was up also working on something and I was up working on something was a little reassuring to being like, oh, okay, she's also working hard. And I know she is working hard and working long hours to do her projects as well. So I think it was nice to be able to just have contact with her whenever I needed to.
Yeah, but that was the same with my supervisor. I wanted to make an appointment to talk about my thesis 1 week in advance, and he was like saying, yeah, okay, for sure, let's do that. And then I asked, okay, when exactly and where exactly? And he just didn't respond. Okay, I mean, let's see, 1 week later, 2 days before, I got back to him, I was like, hey, when exactly do you want to meet? Can we meet? And he was not replying, okay. And then at the night, right before the day we wanted to meet, he just texted at 2 a.m. Yeah, that room, that time, is it okay? Yeah, sure. Okay.
I feel like that happens quite a lot here. It seems like life here is much more later oriented than Hawaii's schedule is, I feel like. Of like people like normally here, like people have like a 1.5 to 2 hour lunch break and most people take a nap during that time. And so then people tend to stay up later here, I feel like, than in Hawaii, maybe even in the mainland US. So there is kind of like that difference. But then, yeah, also just being able to be like, oh, yeah, just wait until eventually it'll all work out.
Going back to speaking about our different advisors, while you were talking, Roland, about your advisor and trying to schedule with him, I think it was pretty interesting because speaking to Joyce and Natalie about their advisors and when they meet, it's totally different schedules. Like everyone has such a different schedule about how you go about meeting your advisor and how many times you meet their advisors, how you communicate with them. Like for me, at least when I meet with my advisor, it used to be every Friday. So I used to meet with her like once a week. And that's partially because I was also part of her design studio. So they were also doing the same fishing village that I was working on. So she invited me to sit in on her class and see what they were designing. And they were also kind of doing like a mini thesis-ish type design. So it was really nice to be able to sit down and hear about what they were designing. But yeah, I met with her almost every single week. And it did get a little overwhelming, but I think it was very helpful. But I know everyone's schedule is differently. Like, how many times did you guys meet with your advisors or communicate with them?
In the beginning, during the fall semester, I met with her every other week. So it was less than what Ashlyn was doing. But it was really helpful in my research because it helped me get it going. And I was able to show her my process or my progress every other week. That just helped me keep track of everything I was doing. But then during the spring semester, I met with her less because just the schedule right after the break is kind of crazy. We were on different schedules. Hawaii students were on different schedules. My advisor had other things that she had to work on, and she was traveling around China and doing a lot of business trips. So scheduling was much harder that way, and yeah.
I think too, they kind of go about the way of you're going to reach out to them when you need help, and they're not really going to reach out to you unless obviously there's a deadline. So it's kind of up to you to see, like, try to talk to them and get whatever information you need from them. But like you mentioned, Joyce, they are busy. They are doing other things, and we have totally different schedules. So it's kind of hard to balance their schedule with our schedule and try to find a time during the day to meet with them.
I think it's also a bit different from in the US. Like, we just received our thesis advisors for theses next year. And in Hawaii, they have a requirement that they have to basically be a faculty member that's teaching classes in order to be your chairperson and your advisor. Whereas here, I don't think it's quite that way. It's like the way like most professors work outside of academia here. like my advisor, I don't think teaches at all. She just works on campus and like some of the research institutes and stuff like that. So it is quite different in like what they're doing. And it seems like most of the faculty members here like teach like maybe 1 or 2 classes, but then they also have their own private practice, or they also are like doing research and all this different stuff, which is quite different from at least my experience with like in the US, where most people are like being a faculty member is their main job, and then maybe they do side projects or something like that. So yeah, like having to be flexible with their schedule and like, oh, they're gonna be gone for the next month on the business trip or something like that, and just being flexible with it.
I guess we can also talk about the following step, which is the blind review. So we had to turn in our, what's supposed to be a finalized thesis. We had to turn that in, and it gets submitted to, I actually don't really know who, but obviously some type of panel at Tongji University, and I'm assuming they're faculty, professors, and they review it and they give you comments on that. And based upon that, you either, I think that there's 3 different like checks. So you can either like fully pass, you pass and you have to revise, or you fail and you have to revise and resubmit. And so us UH students recently just submitted that, and we're waiting back to hear for our results. And based upon whatever we hear from the results, we're either gonna have to resubmit or just work with our advisors to figure out what we need to do to revise. And after that, I think is the last step, which is our defense. So I think for us, at least, I'm not sure about you guys, but we need to go back to Hawaii and defend our thesis in December.
For us, we will also have to defend our thesis at the home university. And it's actually very interesting because the Chinese supervisor has also to be there in person. And that will only happen once a year. So we can do it in November. But if we're not fast enough with finishing the thesis, we will probably have to wait another year. I mean, they told us that maybe we have the chance to do it in May, or we can do it online. But at least from what I heard from former students who did that program was that you really only have one chance a year.
For us, urban planning students is a bit more flexible. So we when we come back, we are just 4 people, and we like should speak to each other. Like if we're more or less finished, we wanna hand it in, and then they will organize like one certain day, or maybe they make it in 2 steps, and 2 people present where we defend our thesis. Our supervisors normally come from China, like the Chinese supervisors normally come, but apparently for us, it's also a possibility for them taking part online. So it seems to be much more flexible than our colleagues in architecture.
I know we've discussed with our Hawaii professors that the Tongji professors also come in person to Hawaii in January. And he's kind of like jokingly said that they kind of like to fight who's coming because they get to come to Hawaii during the winter break in Shanghai when it's all rainy and cold. Our program also is like, if you miss the deadline, you have to wait a whole year. And so since I was kind of like the first international student figuring out this research thing, I wasn't able to get it all done before the deadline. And so I'm waiting another year, and will defend my thesis, not this upcoming December, but the December after that.
Are you saying you're going to be defending your master thesis after your doctorate?
Yes. I will get my doctorate degree before my master's degree. Which is also, I guess, kind of strange, but at the same time, our doctorate degree, normal, if you do the normal one, you don't have a master's before. It's just straight to doctorate. So, yeah.
I think it's also a little crazy because we are doing our master's and then we kind of start our doctorate's thesis. So it's kind of overlapping in a certain way. On top of that, we recently just started our internship as well. And like we mentioned, we're waiting for our blind review comments back. So on top of that, we're waiting for us to basically revise our thesis while interning, while starting our doctorate's thesis. So it's kind of like all different topics we're learning about at the same time. And it can get a little bit overwhelming, but our advisors are there to help us, luckily.
And there's also a little bit of panic of, oh, I haven't done this yet, and we're leaving Shanghai, so the bucket list isn't completed yet. So it is a little bit of a panic mode this summer.
Yeah, even like today, our internship, right after lunch, me, and Ashlyn, and Natalie, we took our computers and we went to this corner and we were working on other stuff. I was working on my DR thesis. I was doing some research, trying to get all the books I need and trying to start reading the books I need to read, like my literature review. And then when we were walking back to our desk after lunch time passes, the GT1 guy who was basically overseeing this internship program in ECADI, he was like, oh, it's so funny seeing all three of you guys here. Like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, I'm doing homework.
I'm panicking.
While you have other people like laying down on their beds and like makeshift beds, and they're like sleeping and napping during lunchtime. And we're just there trying to finish our thesis or like trying to start our thesis and stuff.
If I can give any advice to anyone who is starting their master's thesis at Tongji, I would say just try to research as much as possible, as soon as possible. Dive yourself into books as much as you can. Visit your site as soon as possible. Take a lot of pictures. Talk to your advisor because they probably do know your topic a little bit better than what you are understanding to begin with. And if you want to understand what is required for the master's thesis in the end, you can actually go to the Tongji CAUP website and see the downloaded folder and see everything, all the documents they have there, which is required to eventually be filled out or completed. Well, thank you guys so much for being on the podcast again. We really enjoy having you guys on, and maybe before you guys leave China, we'll have you guys on one more time, or even better, come to Hawaii and we'll have you guys on the podcast then.
I guess we'll go to Hawaii then.
We sure do.
Well, thank you guys so much. And to our listeners, please wish us luck on our master's thesis as we try to complete it.
If you wish to continue to follow our journey, please follow us on Instagram at global_track_architecture. And if you have any specific topics or questions, feel free to leave them down below in the comments or email us at globaltrackarchitecture@gmail.com. And thank you again for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon.
Choose!